Imagine this. In 2025, a massive youth uprising actually topples Nepal's government. This is the story of the election that came next, a real battle for the nation's future.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get into the spark that really started it all, the Gen Z revolution. Then we'll dive into the main event, the old guard versus the new blood. We'll see how Nepal actually went to the polls, what the results really mean, and then we're going to zoom out and see why the whole region is watching so closely. And finally, we'll ask the big question. What happens after the votes are all counted?
Okay, so first things first. To get a handle on this election, you really have to go back to 2025 and what everyone's calling the Gen Z revolution. And look, this wasn't just some protest. This was an explosion. You had young Nepalese who were just completely fed up with the corruption, the unemployment, and a future that looked pretty bleak. They finally just said, you know what, we've had enough.
And just look at how fast everything went off the rails. It started with, of all things, a social media ban. But that was just the match that lit the fuse. I mean, within days, protests got violent, government buildings were literally torched, and the whole government just collapsed. It forced the prime minister to resign and call a snap election, basically as a last-ditch effort to calm things down.
Now, this quote from Rukshibam, one of the protest leaders, is absolutely key. It really gets to the heart of the whole thing. Were people just angry enough to want new faces running the same old system? Or were they demanding something much, much bigger, a complete overhaul of how their country is run? That single question is hanging over this entire story.
Right, so that tension perfectly set the stage for what came next, a huge showdown between the old political establishment and this new wave of reformers that came straight out of the protests. And wow, you could not have picked two more different people to represent this fight. On one side, you've got 74-year-old KP Sharma Oli. He is the establishment. I mean, he was the prime minister they just kicked out. And on the other side, 35-year-old Balendra Shah, a former rapper who became a mayor, and he's all about a total break from the past. So this was never just a political race. It was a battle for the very soul of Nepal.
And this quote, it just says it all about the establishment's thinking, doesn't it? Even after being forced from office, former Prime Minister Oli is just radiating confidence. It's like he's saying, look, that whole protest thing, that was just a little storm in a teacup. We're the ones who know how to run things, and we'll be back in charge soon enough.
Balendra Shah, though, he played a completely different game. He's this former rapper, right? And he basically threw out the entire political playbook. No cozy chats with the press, dodging direct questions from reporters. He had the signature look, always with the black sunglasses. Instead of playing the old media game, he went straight to the youth, connecting with them online and at these massive, energetic rallies. It was a pure, anti-establishment vibe, and for voters sick of the old way of doing things, it was electric.
Okay, so the battle lines are drawn. A classic old versus new matchup. Let's see what actually happened when the country went to vote.
Now this number right here, this is the real game changer. Almost 1 million new first-time voters. And think about who these voters are. They're the very same young people who were out on the streets during the revolution. This one group had the raw power to completely reshape the country's political landscape.
And guess what? They absolutely showed up. The overall turnout was a really solid 60%. That tells you that people were incredibly engaged. They felt like they had a huge stake in this. It wasn't just another election. It felt more like a national referendum on where Nepal was headed.
But in Nepal, voting is one thing. Counting the votes is a whole other beast. Just look at that terrain. We're talking about the Himalayas. The logistics are just mind-boggling. You have election workers hiking for 9-10 hours, literally carrying ballot boxes on their backs through mountains. For the really remote villages, they have to use helicopters. It's an incredible effort, and it's why you don't get final results for days.
So, after all that effort, the voting, the hiking, the helicopters, what was the final verdict? What did the people decide? And what does it actually mean for the government?
This is where the Interim PM Sushila Karki comes in. She had one main job: get the country from crisis to a fair election without it falling apart. And this quote shows she knew exactly what was at stake. The youth had massive expectations. By pulling off the election, she essentially fulfilled her mandate. She gave all that pressure for change a peaceful way to be heard.
But here's where things get a little complicated. Figuring out what the voters really wanted isn't so simple in Nepal, and that's because of their mixed electoral system. Okay, so basically, when you vote, you cast two ballots. One is for a person, a candidate in your local district. That's first past the post. Whoever gets the most votes wins that seat. Simple enough. But your second vote is for a party. All those party votes from across the country get tallied up to assign another batch of seats proportionally. It's supposed to be more representative, but man, it can make for some messy outcomes.
And that brings us to this really critical question. What happens when the two systems give you a mixed message? What if voters pick one kind of leader locally, but their party vote points in a different direction? It's a system that can easily create a fractured government and force uneasy coalitions. And that could be a huge problem when what people were screaming for was decisive, bold change.
All right, let's pull the camera back for a second, because this election isn't just about Nepal. The country is sandwiched right between two superpowers, India and China. So you better believe its neighbors and the US are watching every single move very, very closely. And this table kind of lays it all out. You've got China, which has traditionally been close with Nepal's leftist parties, and they're worried they might lose influence. Then there's India, the huge neighbor to the south, which is all about its economic relationship and gets nervous about any hint of anti-Indian populism. And then you have the US, which is basically looking at Nepal as another piece on the great geopolitical chessboard with China. So whoever is in charge in Kathmandu is going to have to be a master at juggling these huge competing interests.
Okay, so after all that, the protests, the campaigns, the votes, the geopolitics, we are left with the biggest question of them all. And the stakes are just incredibly high. This warning from political analyst Paranjan Acharya is pretty stark. Think of the election as a pressure release valve for everything that boiled over in 2025. If this new government can't deliver on those core promises, jobs, an end to corruption, that pressure is just going to build right back up again. And that could mean more trouble down the road. And that's where we'll leave it. So, what was this? Was it a genuine revolution, the start of a real systemic change led by the youth? Or was it just a reset? Just a changing of the guard? With the same old problems of corruption and instability still bubbling away under the surface? The answer to that question is going to define Nepal for a generation.